This is SoulCharge, the podcast for women leaders to take the highest level of ownership of their power to create results now. I'm your host, Stacy B. Let's dive in. Are you addicted to healing, or are you obsessed with your vision? These are two totally different camps that I know you've probably been playing in the wrong one. You've been playing in obsessing about healing, obsessing about what's wrong, and obsessing about what's there to fix. And today, we're going to dive deep into the differences between these two, how to hold the vision, and how to finally say goodbye to being obsessed with fixing, being obsessed with thinking that there's a problem, and to stop the major energy leak around trying to solve something that was never yours to solve. So let's dive in. These two camps of the wound or the healing or the coaching or the support and the vision. Let's define both of those for the purposes of this episode today. So when I talk about the wound or the healing, many of you may be on a path of getting support, having a coach, having multiple coaches, having a coach for every department of your life. We're all a little different in the support that we need. But the key distinction that I want to make here is where you are coming from in your intention to get support, because there is a world of getting so obsessed with healing that you actually are never addressing the key or core thing that's happening. You're trying to heal the symptoms of the core thing that's manifesting. And in doing that, you're seeking out support from people that are honestly just keeping you in the same place. There are few coaches that can hone in on what's actually going on and help you achieve clarity in what's going on. And so when I talk about the wound or the healing, you're in that camp if you feel like you can't put your finger on it, but you're trying to figure something out. It's not necessarily that you have a strategy problem or a business problem or any clear problem externally that you can't solve. The feeling is that there is this ache or this unsettled feeling within you that you haven't quite been able to figure out. When I say being committed to the vision, what I'm talking about is, are you clear of where you're going? Are you clear of what you want your life to look like? And are you really moving the needle and working towards that on the daily? My first question to you is, which camp are you currently in? Are you focused on what's wrong in other people, focused on what's wrong in yourself? Can you see that there's a part of you, if you are completely honest, that is obsessed with what's wrong, only to find more of what's wrong, only to go down the rabbit hole, into the darkness, the hole that never has an end? That's the healing world. That's figuring out what's wrong and never really coming up for air on that topic. Or do you feel like you're committed to the vision, where you're clear on where you're going? You're clear on where you're going. You don't allow yourself to consider any other option except what you're deciding upon today, how you're moving the vision forward, and what that looks like in the next quarter. So that's my first question for you, is to just bring your attention to, can you identify which camp you're in? The other thing I want to bring to your attention is inquire within yourself. Can you observe that you're bouncing between these worlds? Can you observe that on a good day, you're bouncing into some problems, maybe, 2 out of 10 hours? Can you see that you are oscillating between these two worlds? That's my third reflection point for you. No matter where you're at, just the fact that you're listening to bring attention to what's going on is sometimes the first and last step. I know for me, when I get an awareness on something and my attention is brought to a topic and I wasn't aware of it, it feels like a bomb went off inside of me, where I'm like, oh my gosh, how could I have missed this? It's glaring me right in the face. And I trust that you are experiencing that same clarity as it relates to which camp you're hanging out in. Because what I find so much in this work is that It's not so much that these topics are complex, but the way in which they're explained to us are so theoretical that we can't necessarily apply them practically. And that's really what I'm so passionate about, is making these complex topics, these theoretical topics, concrete, giving you metaphors to process through them, giving you ideas to consider about them, right? And so when you look at this more in which camp am I hanging out in, it allows you to see how much time you're really focusing on the problem, the wound, something to fix, versus spending time in the vision. So here is my personal share on this, just to give you even more perspective on how this can show up. It's so fascinating to me how in my life and from my perspective, I perceived working on myself or healing as a positive thing, right? It was positive effort. It was, getting to the root on things, getting to the bottom of it once and for all. But what I found is there are a lot of people out in the world that want to support your healing versus eradicate it. And what I mean by that difference is there's a lot of people, and I think therapy falls into this camp. Today is all about camps, apparently. Therapy falls into this camp, talk therapy specifically, from my experience, where it's really supportive of talking about the problem, but not necessarily putting that story away once and for all. And so if you're like me and experience talk therapy or experience that, growing up, that early conditioning of talking about problems is at the root of things. And so for me, that was my default. And so even though I was getting the coaching, pursuing the personal development, the root of what was going on was there was this addiction to, as some might reference, like the fatal flaw. Like there is a flaw, there is something I can't figure out, and I will literally invest whatever it takes to figure out what this was, what this is. And I don't know if you can relate to that. Maybe it sounds a little different for you. Maybe it's more of like you're in a relationship and you can't figure out this one little piece that just doesn't seem to click. Or maybe you are in, a point in your business where it's just feeling like it just feels different. It doesn't feel like it used to. And in that feeling of off, you can't shake it. And so you can't necessarily invest your attention in the vision because the fact that it feels off or foreign or almost like you're an outsider to your own life, that's something that we hear from a lot of our clients, is that they've created these successful lives, but they feel like they're not in the equation or they're on the outside looking in, almost this fishbowl effect kind of thing. But in that, what we do is we believe that there's something to figure out. And so in my journey, it was like constant rehashing of what was the perceived problem. And one of the things that I learned in India when I went to the wisdom school and studied there, they said something like this. It was to the effect of, you have created problems and you have real problems. And a created problem means that a lot of times you're trying to figure out a solution to a problem that's not a real problem. Einstein said it differently, where he said, you can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness it was created. And that's so true when we're experiencing being in the healing camp or being obsessed on the problems in our lives. Is it's impossible to fix those if you're not clear of where you're going and not clear of what you want. It's so interesting how many people that I work with, they are so successful, but when I ask them what they really want, they look at me like they've seen a ghost. And I can admit to that too. And I think that that is such an indicator of being so in the problems that you don't know what it is that you want. And so the first piece of today's episode is very much getting clear for yourself. Which camp are you living in, or are you hanging out in both? Once you have that awareness, is deep diving on how this is showing up for you, because it's so easy for this to take over, because solving problems is something as women leaders we've been rewarded for, we've been complimented on, making things happen and figuring it out and multitasking and achieving things. We've been rewarded for this. And so it breaks our brain a bit when it's time to retract the focus from the problem and go all in on the vision. And so that's what really happened in my life. And frankly, it was intermittent in my life. So one thing that I noticed a lot was that I would create something on purpose, many things on purpose, right? That's what we do as successful leaders is we create a lot of things intentionally. But the amount of energy that was spent focusing on what wasn't working or how things could be better could have been allocated to going all in on the bigger vision, or even more clarity or even more spaciousness to fuel that bigger vision. And so maybe for you, what you're experiencing is not necessarily having the time to allocate to think about the bigger picture. But I promise you, if you're honest with yourself right now, that the amount of time you're focusing on what's wrong in your life, if you stopped that and you went all in on what you want, or spending an hour at the coffee shop once a week alone in quiet, thinking about what you want and being so committed to not focusing on the problem, that alone is going to get you more excited, bring your energy back into focus so that you can really go all in on what you're thinking about, what you're planning about, and whatever next is for you, you can get fully behind. But practically speaking, that's practical application. We underestimate how much of our energy is tied up in thinking about what's wrong. And I think we're also in a culture and an environment where, like, there are entire industries created to usher us along in focusing on what's wrong so that we can fix it. And what I'm saying today is, what if all that was needed was to stop focusing on what's wrong and to go all in on what you want? What if the energy leak and the real problem was solved simply by us deciding that we're going to drive and this is how it's going to look, and we're no longer willing to allow ourselves to spend our precious time, our precious attention on trying to solve things that aren't even necessary to solve. And now you could easily say, like, Stacy, what do you mean? Like, I have real problems in my life that need to be solved. And my question for you is this: is that true, or are you simply looking at it that way? What if you decided to just think about what you wanted? Or even if you took the problems that you're currently facing in your life or the challenges that you're facing, and this is a great exercise for you to take away, is think about a challenge in your life and think about its opposite. Can you think about what you would want, or what you would want if that challenge or problem wasn't present? Because what's so interesting is that the problem and what you don't want activates you in such a way, triggers you in such a way that it's literally an addiction to this problem. And go back to my earlier episodes on SoulCharge, and I talk about the 8 addictions. One of them is our stories. And there, a lot of times what I see with our women leaders that we work with is that there is this whole story wrapped around this problem. And we've told the story so many damn times that we don't even know the facts of the thing we're dealing with anymore. It's been spoken about and extended and drawn out in so many different ways that we can't really even remember what the facts are. And so whatever you're facing, I'm going to ask you that is, can you really take your energy away from what's wrong and go all in on what you want to create? I was working with a client recently and I asked her to do this. And she accepted the invitation, the challenge, and accepted the opportunity to be more mindful and really be diligent to take the energy that was currently going towards this problem and extract that energy and totally direct it to what she wanted. And I told her to share with me what came up for her as she started doing this. And over the next couple of days, what was so interesting is all that came up was all of this mind chatter that actually was in the tone of beating herself up. In other words, it was what she's lacking, it was how she's insecure, it's disempowering thoughts, all of this material. And do you know what I said to her? I told her to stop. That's all. And she was taken back by the simplicity of my response. And I said to her, the truth of the matter is you are driving. You're driving if you're focused on problems, and you're driving if you're creating solutions and you're 100% all in on what your vision is. And at the end of the day, you have the choice. Just like that brilliant Viktor Frankl quote that I often reference in the pods and also in our programs. Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response is our power to choose. The stimulus of your training, your default programming as a human is to look for threat, to pay attention to danger. And you have the ability to choose how you respond to that, because the danger is not the tiger anymore. It is you. You honestly, on a daily basis, are your biggest threat. And it's really time to take ownership of that and to decide something different. Because the truth of the matter is that you have the ability to say, stop. Just like you would to your child, just like you would to someone treating you poorly. You need to start calling that of yourself and requiring yourself to act in a way that is supportive of where you're going, not to continue to manage the symptoms of what was yesterday, to continue to manage the symptoms of what hasn't worked or what isn't working. I promise you, if you decide to shift from managing symptoms, focusing on what's wrong, to fully going in on your vision, it is going to happen faster. You're going to have more clarity. You're going to have more joy in the process of creating what you want, which is the whole process. Because let's be real, we can create anything that we want. And when it's fun, it's juicy and it's engaging and it's energizing, and you deserve to have that life experience. And so it's energizing. You get to create it with really amazing people, right? And so it's not just about these two camps. It's about, what do you want to represent as a leader? What do you want to stand for? Do you want to be a leader that's focused on some problems and partly focused on vision? Or do you want to be known for burning the boats, cutting off all of the old garbage, and going all in into your vision? No one knows your vision like you do. No one believes in it. No one is the sacred keeper of it. You have been chosen to usher your desires forward and to do it passionately, with clarity and conviction and certitude. No one else can own that role except you. Every minute that you focus on problems, every moment that you are addicted to your healing and not choosing your liberation, that is a moment that you are stealing from your future, and you are stealing from the future of humanity in the way in which you're impacting. So let's take this up a notch. Let's take ownership in a new way and say, I'm not willing to accept this behavior from myself anymore. And I'm going all in on what I know is true. And I am going to watch my language. I'm going to watch my thoughts, my emotions, and really be mindful of letting it go, that there's something to heal or solve or fix. And when I do that, I know that that frees me up to build, and it frees me up to build and be all that I am meant to be. Are you loving SoulCharge? If so, hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and share an episode. We want to bring powerful content to women leaders each week so that women can be unleashed to create the results that they want now. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.